If you've ever said, "Yet, rifle's fine," go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Rifle was not fine, guys. Rifle was not even close to fine. You can't even get a chin weld with an optic.
Think, Mark!
It was time that it got upgraded. Guys, make sure that you like and comment. Comment section is a little bit tame. Maybe get in there, maybe cause a little bit of destruction, make YouTube kind of really question why I'm on YouTube in the first place. Do those good things that make just everything much more difficult for me. Guys, the biggest supporter of this channel is Brownells. Go check out their website. They have everything that you need. Now, of course, the sponsors for this particular video are Jake's Mint Chew, discount code Garand. And of course, we have the National Association for Gun Rights. If you've been paying attention to DC, you know that our rights are under attack. Go check out the link right below. They are supporting us directly, and a big thank you to them. Ladies, gentlemen, often forgotten, but most certainly not by me. AK-105s, welcome to the channel. Today, we're gonna be talking about how the Kalashnikov has been modernized. A lot of really cool things have been going on there, and I've been really privileged to have been able to talk to a lot of end users who use the Kalashnikov system professionally. And there's been a lot of really cool advancements, and in many ways, it definitely mirrors the advancements that we've seen with the M4 more recently. So we're gonna get into that, but before we do, full disclosure, what is my relationship with the companies? Nothing, luckily. Now, as far as the builds are concerned, so to be clear, every rifle was paid for by me, as well as the furniture and pretty much everything that you see on there, with the exception of the B.E. Myers Mall, which was given to me for evaluation. So that is my relationship with those companies. So getting into the AKs here, there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on. And to kind of bring everything together, you're seeing essentially a very similar thing to what happened with M4s in about the early 2000s. So essentially, as warfare, as gunfighting has evolved, so have the accessories. We now have optics, we have low power variable optics, we have laser aiming devices for night vision, and we need ways to mount these things. In the case of the M4, the M16 family of rifles, it ended up being pretty freaking easy to mount them. It was a simple modification to the upper receiver, and then the rails, due to the construction, were quite easy to retrofit these rifles that had already been made prior to the invention of these rails. So in this case, we have a Block 2 M4. So we have a simple M4 with a new rail on there that allows us to mount any types of devices that we need. So in a lot of ways, these new AK platforms are very much so mirroring what you see with the Block 1 and the Block 2 programs, where these rifles are being updated now to allow for the mounting and use of more modern optics and modern devices. So in this case, we're going to be talking about two main companies, and primarily Russian, because again, we're trying to stick with what we're seeing with end users in a professional environment. So if you come over here and take a look, we have two main products here. We have Zenitco right here. We have the Zenitco Handguards, and we have the dust covers right here with the stocks. And then we have SureShot right here with their upper receiver chassis right here, as well as their stock design. So we will be talking about how these things work, why they did all this stuff, how it all looks together. Let's go ahead, let's get into it. So to start off with, so right here what we have is a pretty basic, what you'd consider special operations kind of use AK, with Zenitco furniture on here, including the Zenitco dust cover. So we're gonna pop up the name of this guy right here, but what makes these really interesting and compelling in my mind is that they're able to retain zero. So what I mean by this is that if you take a look at the rail right here, it actually interfaces and is actually pressure fit directly into the receiver itself. This allows for a steady mounting platform, because up until this point, there really wasn't that good of options as far as mounting accessories on there. The handguard right here is just pretty loose, and you're not able to retain zero with what would be kind of classic AK handguards. It's just, there's not enough pressure there. And then on the side for our optics, we have these side rails, which are pretty good, but that being said, it certainly left a lot to be desired. So these further modernizations that we're seeing from Zenitco are allowing for a more AR type setup, which is good because as the world is right now, most products center around AR type products. So coming into the front end of the rifle here and doing what the Marine Corps loves best, but we're going to be talking about these muzzle devices. So first off, obviously with AKs, you see one of two things happening. Either you see end users using some type of conical flash hider like we're seeing here, or some type of suppressor. So in this case, we'll be showing these flash hiders right here. So on this one right here, we have a flash hider from Strela. Now, compared to your typical AR-15 type design, this is actually indexed off a pin that holds it in place. So it's not quite what you're used to seeing with a AR type system, but it's still very sturdy. And now, just like anything in Russia, these things are massively oversized and overbuilt for what they are needed to be. But that being said, they are also very effective. So talk is cheap and shooting is much more expensive, but on Garand we want to demonstrate. So obviously we're in daylight, but we do have an AK with a 12.5 inch barrel, and we want to show you how effective that muzzle flash reduction is. So, as you can see there, little to no muzzle rise, little to no flash. They are effective, in many ways mirror a lot of the AR type muzzle devices that you're seeing in professional use right now, in which they're not really looking for a compensator. And in this case, they're looking for the best flash suppression possible. And that's why we have these conical designs used. Now, that being said, certain entities are certainly using suppressors. So in this case, we do have a AK with a AR type suppressor on there, and these certainly do work. Now, of course, we have the Russian suppressors. Unfortunately, we can't get those here because there are things called import restrictions, but you could probably get your hands on them with a little bit of crime. But in any case, certainly AKs do work well with suppressors, and to prove that, we'll go ahead and we'll shoot this because it's always interesting to see. And like I said, shooting is expensive, so we're gonna go ahead and send it. All right, so we've talked enough about muzzle devices. Point is, they've been doing a lot of things different from what you typically have seen. So compared to the older slant brakes and AK-74 type muzzle brakes, we've seen a lot of good progression being made, and it's definitely mirroring what we've been seeing with the AR type systems. Now, moving back from there to our handguards, this is where it gets interesting to me. Because now that we have a handguard that is able to retain zero, we have the ability to now easily mount IR laser devices that can hold zero, whether that be on the top rail or in this case, on the side rail with this end gall right here on this Sport 1 rail, which is a slightly thinner version of what we have on this 5.56 AK. If we take a look at this rail right here, it's not what you typically expect. It's not Picatinny, it's not M-LOK or anything like that. It's what's called basis. It's its own Russian mounting system. Now it is very effective. It's a little bit foreign to us because obviously we use M-LOK over here, but it still works really well. And dare I say, it's actually pretty attractive looking. Now, as you can see, it is a very sturdy mounting system, and we're able to, with the Picatinny mounted there, we're still able to retain zero with our IR laser and IR illuminator devices, which is going to be important for night vision work. Now, if we come over to this one right here, we can see on our thicker boy right here that we do have Picatinny on the bottom and on the top. And again, there are other examples that have Picatinny on the sides as well, rather than the basis mounting system. Again, it's going to depend on what type of rail that you want. There are options out there. Now, when it comes to these thicker rails, these are typically what you're seeing in Russian service right now. With these thinner rails, not so much, and that's due to the fact that those thicker guys are definitely a little bit tougher. Now, that being said, in my opinion, I still have found that the Sport 1 rails, which is what we have right here, are still plenty strong enough to be used in military service. Now, there's a couple really good things that happen when you use a Zenitco handguard. And the thing about it is just like what you saw with the M4 platform. So when we went from a plastic handguard over to the thicker Daniel Defense handguards in the Block 2 program, we saw that the barrels didn't heat up nearly as much. The weapon remained cooler, and that was due to the fact that the handguards act as a heat sink. They allow the barrels, they allow the components to be cooler. That is the same case as what you're seeing with these Zenitco handguards, where these keep the barrels significantly cooler, and they thereby are going to increase the service life of these particular weapons. Now, there's a couple really good videos out there showing how cool these barrels are kept, anywhere from 280 degrees Celsius and lower, which is pretty incredible. I think in the video they did like 1,000 rounds or something like that on it. These are really effective systems. These are certainly combat rails, and again, by keeping that weapon cooler, you increase the service life of extractors and a lot of other things, as well as making sure that you're not going to have as much of a wandering zero, because that barrel isn't going to be getting as hot. So we have a lot of really good things going on there, because especially if you shot an AK, you know with the AK that a problem has always been heat. These things will get hot very fast. So I can't say enough good things about the Zenitco. And we also have to mention that the Sure Shot very much so falls into the same category as being a major upgrade in terms of heat management on the AK system. So what I think is really interesting is the handguard and how it interfaces with our optics rail right here, our B33, which is this guy right here. So previously, if you were going to mount an optic on a dust cover, like what we'd have right here, it wouldn't be very stable. There's a lot of problems with mounting an optic to a rail dust cover. So Zenitco has basically solved this in many ways. So the first way that they dealt with this is the dust cover directly interfaces with the lower handguard right here, which is pressure fit into the receiver. So that's taking out that slop at the front, and then at the rear, that slop is also taken out with a custom fit right there. Because of that, we have a very, very stable optic platform. So what's even cooler is that even with this mounted, you're still able to get into it and to disassemble your rifle, to clean it and do all that good stuff, and you can still retain zero. And you can see how crazy that pressure fit is, that after you snap that down, you have to pull back on that bolt to get everything into place. So it's a very tight fit right there. And that's going to be important. You know, from a lot of my guys who don't understand this, think of like an M249, a lot of those dust cover mounted optics, they're still very stable, and you're seeing very much the same thing with the Zenitco mounting system. Now, since we can mount optics further back on the rail, we're able to use a lot more, because a low power variable optic, something like this right here, requires a 3-inch or less eye relief. So we're starting to see essentially the same capabilities that we see from our modern ARs now on our modern AKs. And a lot of people have said that, you know, AKs aren't accurate. That's probably because they haven't dealt with modern AKs. Modern AK platforms are very, very accurate. And we'll show you on the hill right now. So we have handguards keeping the weapon in service longer. We have an optics rail, which allows us to mount modern optics. And finally, we have the stock. Because there are a couple issues with mounting optics on AKs. And that big thing is going to be that most of our optics are going to be AR height. So a couple issues with that is that the AK is a very long stroke gas piston system. So because of that, it's going to be just taller. From the height of the barrel to the height of where the optic is going to be taller than what you're seeing with your typical AR-15. And that's simply due to the difference in operating system. And we're not going to get into the pros and cons of each, other than say that it's something to be aware of. So if we come over to our barricade over here and kind of talk a little bit to it, one thing to be aware of is that because your optic is going to be higher on your gun, what would typically be clear when shooting over a barricade with an AR will not be with an AK. Okay, here we are on our barricade. I'm gonna demonstrate what I'm talking about. Typically with my AR, if I were to aim it, this would be about the height where I know I would be clear. Now with the AK, due to the height of the gas system, it's not quite gonna be clear. So the only thing you have to be aware of is that with the AK, you're gonna have to train yourself to get up a little higher than you'd usually be used to compared to the AR in order to clear that barrel over the top of that barricade. Not a big deal, just something that you need to train to. Okay, so AR height optics, great. Also a couple problems. So we have a stock right now set up at the traditional AK height. So, and that allows me to see through the iron sights. So I'm at that low setting, that is great. But I have my AR height optic on here, so in order to see through it, I'm coming off of that and I'm getting a chin weld. And that's not gonna be great for accuracy. Luckily, this has been solved by Zenitco. So we have the Zenitco stock right here, and we have this one already adjusted with this particular optic. As you can see, I have that cheek pad raised in order to give me the correct shooting position in order to get good accuracy and good consistency. In addition to that, I can also adjust the length of pull. Very simple and a very robust design. All right, and as you can see here, we have the correct optic height. It's going to make shooting much more comfortable with this particular weapon. So having that correct height greatly increases the ergonomics of the weapon overall. Good old Tarkov reference for you guys. Now, we've talked about our optics, our stocks, everything's looking good. Let's talk a little bit about safeties, because these have also gotten a lot better. So we have our traditional AK safety right here. As you can see, if I am on the weapon and I need to go fire, I need to reach my hand up, click off, in order to fire the weapon. As you can see with these modern safeties, I can simply reach up onto this ledge right here and I can engage that and get onto that weapon faster. It's just a better design. There are lots of companies that have these modern safeties on them. You can find them everywhere. And that also brings us to charging handles. So with these Zenitco charging handles, they're just round. You're able to get onto them a little bit easier compared to your more traditional AK charging handles, which work and are good, but I definitely prefer the size and the ease of getting on these Zenitco charging handles. It should also be noted that many Russian companies make a copy. This one is from Strela right here. Now, finally, I do want to talk a little bit about triggers. AK triggers are already pretty good, to be honest, but a couple companies have come out with some really stellar ones, and one trigger that I really love has been the ALG trigger. So it should be noted that the ALG triggers are not like a drop-in, something you can just kind of throw in. There does need to be some fitting to make them work. But once you do, you get a pretty phenomenal trigger. So we have this trigger, which was fit by Jim Fuller himself. We'll go ahead and we'll try this one out. Pushing into it, we have a little bit of play, and we have a very clean let off at about 2.5, 3 pounds. Let's try that one more time. Reset. It's a really nice trigger on this AK. So overall, you have a system that is just massively improved from what we originally had from our older AKMs and 7.62, which were very effective weapons, all the way to our 105s and newer variants, which make use of modern manufacturing and modern materials to just have a much better, more ergonomic system that is comparable to what you see with ARs. So there's a lot to be said for AKs. Obviously, the market is pretty expensive right now, and the ammunition is a little bit of a bitch to get, but they are very interesting and very compelling pieces of firearms. So definitely, if you can get out there and get your hands on them, I couldn't recommend it enough. So of course, when it comes to AK builds, there's a lot of builders out there. I do typically recommend the ones we have experience with, such as Jim Fuller with Fuller Phoenix. We have Meridian Defense, who makes awesome weapons, and of course, CW Gunworks, who did this Sure Shot USA. So lots of great AK builders out there, but as always, the thing about it is, as cool as these guns are, if you don't train with them, it's really not going to matter, guys. So make sure that you get training. Tons of great guys that get training from Haley Strategic, Bear Solutions, Cogworks. Make sure that you get out there, because as cool as these are, they're just tools. You are the weapon, so make sure that you get training and become better. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I've got nothing else for you. Final thing for you guys, stop comparing ARs and AKs. Guys, thank you for watching. We got nothing else. Make sure you stay tuned. A big thank you to Patreon supporters. You guys absolutely rock.